Hello, Jason here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to do the next video in my Stephen King reading project series. And so if you guys are unfamiliar, I'll link those up here. You can check those out, the ones that I've done so far. But basically what I'm doing is I'm reading all of Stephen King's books in the order that they were published. So I started with Carrie, and I'm just working my way all the way through all of them. Now, so far, I've gotten through the 1970s and the 1980s, and I've made videos of those. Now, this is the first part of the 1990s. I've been having to split the decades up into two parts because there's so many books that I can't do them all in one video. So I just split it up. So anyway, this one is going to be 1990s Part 1. This goes from 1990 all the way through 1994. And there's like 8 books or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, here we go. First one is published in 1990. It's a novella collection. It's called 4 Past Midnight. So this has The Langoliers, The Library Policeman, Secret Window, Secret Garden, and The Sundog, which The Langoliers was made into like a pretty awesome like mini series or TV whatever back in the 90s, and then Secret Window was made into a movie with Johnny Depp. I don't think The Library Policeman has been made into a movie, and I don't think The Sundog has either. But either way, if you want to check those out, I've seen them. The Langoliers I remember from, it was always on TV, and it was kind of campy and kind of low budget and whatever. But from what I remember about the miniseries, the story in the book is pretty. It's a pretty faithful adaptation. And then as far as Secret Window, I did see the movie, but I don't really remember it that well. But the book is good. Like, yeah, all the stories in here are pretty good. So I will say, I think Different Seasons, his novella collection, his other novella collection, is better, but it's less horror. These are more horror stories. And also, The Sundog is kind of like, it's a Castle Rock story, so it takes place in Castle Rock, Maine. It's kind of a prequel, sort of, to one of the other books that's going to come later on this list. So, yeah. Anyway, 4 Past Midnight, it's a pretty good one. Go for it. Now, the next book is The Stand, the complete and uncut edition. Now, you might be wondering, wait a minute, I thought The Stand was published in 1970s. And you'd be correct, except for the version that was published in the 70s was, his publisher made him cut like 400 pages out of the manuscript because at the time it was like his third book. They didn't think that they could sell a book that thick for the price they would have to price it at for an author that's not that well known or whatever. So he had to cut like a third of the book out. I've never read the 1978 version. I don't know what the differences are really. I'd like to, if I ever come across one, I will buy it and check it out just so that I have a copy of it or whatever. But from what I've heard, this one is significantly better because it's got a lot more stuff in it. It's got more Trash Can Man, who's a character that I love. It's just like a lot better, more fleshed out. So this one came out in the 90s, and there are a few other things, like he updated some of the time, like the references in the times. Like this one talks about AIDS, which wasn't really a thing in the 70s. So he did kind of update it as well, not just adding in a whole bunch of more stuff. But anyway, The Stand is great. If you haven't read it, you really should. It's good. And then the next one is The Wastelands. This is the third book in the Dark Tower series. And so I don't want to go too much into it because of spoilers. It being the third book, I don't want to give away anything from the first two. But basically, Roland and his quartet continue on their journey. And this is actually where the journey kind of begins. The first two books are mostly like set up and then getting the band together, and then now we're on our way. So this is a great one. It's one of my favorites in the series, and yeah, if you haven't read The Dark Tower, you really should. Now, another thing, another series that I'm gonna start doing with videos is Dark Tower discussion videos. I mentioned it in my Insomnia review that I was thinking about doing this, and so I'm working on those. And those are going to be coming pretty soon. So be on the lookout for that. If you're a Dark Tower fan and you want to discuss them, those videos will be coming. So anyway, The Wastelands. Great. Next is Needful Things. This one came out in 1991. And this was the book I was talking about when I was saying The Sundog was kind of a prequel to this. Because, yeah, there's like thrift story type stuff that goes on in The Sundog, and some of the characters from that book end up in this. They take place in the same town. Things like that. So, yeah, and Castle Rock. If you've read any of the other Castle Rock novels, you know, like Cujo or The Dead Zone or The Dark Half, actually, is another one that ties in with this pretty closely. The character that's the police officer in that is a main character in this, Alan Pangborn. But anyway, this is about a thrift store that opens up in Castle Rock, Maine, and the proprietor of the shop is kind of a weird guy. Very charming. People like his little store, and they keep going there. And but yeah, it's maybe not exactly what it seems. But it's really about the town and how small town conflicts can like escalate into crazy stuff. And it's a good one. It was a little slow, I thought. Like, there was a lot of build up. A lot of things had to happen in order for like the end final conflict thing to get set up. So the first half of it was kind of, I don't know, a little slow. But once you get to like the last third of the book, it was really, really good. So check that out. All right, next one is Gerald's Game, which I enjoyed. Didn't think it's not my favorite Stephen King novel, but it was a good one. And yeah, essentially it's about this couple. They go up to their cabin in the woods for like a romantic weekend or whatever, and they're getting frisky, and they're doing some play, and they're Gerald, her husband, Jesse is the main character's name, handcuffs her to the bed as part of this thing, and then he has a heart attack and dies, and so she's stuck to this bed and can't get out, and so that's it. It's her in this bed, and it's a lot about her internal struggle. It's 90% of the book is her thinking about how she's going to get out, and it brings to light all of these repressed memories and things like that that she has to deal with in order to escape. And she has to sacrifice a lot. And then there's also another little element where like there's another character that like you're not sure the whole time whether this is real or whether it's all in her head. That part was like, meh, I don't know. The end of this book kind of, I wasn't thrilled about it. I almost wish that it had been in her imagination the whole time. I guess that's a little spoilery what I just said, but yeah. And the Netflix made a movie of it, and it was pretty good. I watched the movie actually before I read the book, which I probably shouldn't have, but yeah, it was a pretty good one. So anyway, I recommend this one. It's good, and it's not terribly long for a Stephen King book, at least. The next one is Dolores Claiborne. Came out in 1992, and I loved this book. It's a little weird compared to like most Stephen King novels. There's no chapters, and it's basically just this lady, Dolores, telling a story. So it's all just her speaking for hours to the police about things that happened in her life. Basically, it's about when she killed her husband. And yeah, it's just so like Dolores, like the story that she's telling is really dark and sad and whatever, but the way she tells, she's just such a funny character. Like the way her manner of speaking is just hilarious, and I loved this book. I thought it was so good. It was super engaging. It was one of those books that you just don't want to put down because, like I said, she's just speaking the whole time. So, and there's no chapter breaks. There's nothing like that. So, like, I think I didn't read this all in one go, but I think that probably the best way to read this would be to just sit and read the whole thing without stopping because. And it's not terribly long. I mean, it would take you like the entire day probably to do that. It's like 300 pages. Yeah, not quite. But yeah. And then the other thing, so this book and Gerald's Game are connected as well. So there's cool stuff like that. And you know how Stephen King is, like all of his novels are kind of connected to each other in ways. So yeah, I highly recommend this one. It might have ended up in my top 10 Stephen King novels. I can't make that list yet because I haven't read all of his books, but this one might be on it because it was good. The next one is a short story collection called Nightmares and Dreamscapes. This came out in 1993, and I don't know. It was not that good. There were a couple of stories that I liked. Dolan's Cadillac was good. I thought The Night Flyer and Popsy were kind of alright. The Moving Finger was okay. They got a hell of a band. That was alright. So some of them were good, but some of them were downright just bad. Like, for example, I guess Brooklyn Notes? Or Brooklyn August? No, Head Down. Whichever one is the one about his son's Little League baseball season. I read maybe 15 pages and then just stopped reading it because it was just so boring and I didn't care at all. It's not even like a story. It was just like him talk like he was he wrote it, I guess, for like a news something like a newspaper. And it was just like a sports story. I didn't like it. So I skipped that one. So I guess technically I didn't even really read the whole thing. But I don't know. It was fine. But if you're going to read short story collection, read Skeleton Crew or Night Shift. Those are the other ones that I've read of his, and those are both fantastic. So yeah, I think this one was just kind of a miss. It was, like I said, there was a couple of good ones in there, but unless you're like a completionist, I would just not even worry about this one. And then the last one, published in 1994, is Insomnia. It's a big, thick boy. And I do have a review of this. I did a couple days ago, so I'll post that or link that or whatever up here. This book is great. If you've read The Dark Tower and have some context around it. It's probably not so great if you haven't. And I talk a little bit about this in my review. In fact, that's what the review's about. I don't really go into the details of the story really at all. But I guess essentially it's about this old guy who starts to have insomnia after his wife dies. And he starts to hallucinate and stuff happens. And then, there's reasons behind all this stuff that connect to other parts of the story. But also, all the while, there's in this town. It takes place in Derry, which is the same town that it takes place in. But there's a women's shelter, like a abortion clinic or whatever, in this town, and there's all these protests all the time and stuff. And so that's kind of a subplot during the whole thing, or that's like that's like what the event that's really causing a lot of the conflict in the town. So yeah, it's a really good book. Like I said, especially if you've read The Dark Tower, because there's a very direct connection to the Dark Tower thing. So this is another book that I'm sure I will talk about during my Dark Tower analysis and discussion videos. So again, look out for those. They're going to be coming. This one probably won't come into play until like later on in that series, because most of the stuff that happens in this has to do with things that happen in the later books. So it might be a little while before we get to any sort of discussion around that kind of stuff. But regardless, if you've read The Dark Tower, I highly recommend checking this one out, because it'll add a lot to the whole mythology and thing of the Crimson King and other characters. So anyway, that's it. Those are the 8 novels that Stephen King published between 1990 and 1994. Yeah, it was pretty good. So I got to read a whole bunch more to get to the second half of the 90s. And then that's it. That's the end of the 1990s. Or that will be the end. So be on the lookout for that. And if you want to, see more of this stuff, just subscribe down below. And then you can get notified when new videos come out. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. So leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think of these books, if you've read any of these. And yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your week. Peace.